Hey guys, I'm Beltran, and today we'll be looking into the subject of, is race mixing permitted in the Bible? I'm actually noticing a resurgence in the subject of race mixing and how overall miscegenation should be forbidden because we are parted by the waters and we are each in our own respective countries and continents, and that in itself should be evidence enough that each ethnic group belongs in each particular continent. But it's all straw man arguments and they all fall flat, in my opinion. And I don't like the term race mixing either. I'm not offended by it, but there is only one race. It's the human race. But if we're going to define our terms, we're all human beings, but there are ethnic groups. And each ethnic group has something special that it brings to the table. Each ethnic group has a particular custom or particular food, and that's beautiful. Now, when one claims that multiculturalism doesn't work, this makes sense to me because it is impossible for one entire collective to agree on one fundamental way of life. There will always be opposition by one group or another. The dominant culture and the dominant people must remain, and their terms and their culture must be abided by. So those who choose to assimilate, those who choose to come into that country and jump all the legal hurdles to arrive and to migrate correctly, well, the onus is on them to assimilate and adopt that way of life, as my family has done. In Australia, the phrase, "diversity is our strength," is often uttered, but the experiment itself is not really succeeding, is it? I mean, the word diversity is a derivative of the word division. And there is so much division. There are enclaves, there are separate groups. But the issue that we have with diversity is not because of this. It's not complexion. It has nothing to do with the amount of melanin in your skin. What it has to do with is combating cultures and ideologies that just are not cohesive with the Australian way of life. They're not cohesive with the Western way of life, and this is the issue. You know, there should be nothing controversial in stating that the majority in this country should remain white, European dominated, but unfortunately that's perceived as racist. You know, if a Japanese person said we've got to keep the country predominantly Japanese, that's somehow not offensive. But then when it comes to the white people and white skin color, well, all hell breaks loose. I've said nothing offensive. White Europeans who colonized this country have been very flawed in a lot. There are a lot of kinks to work out, but it is because of the white European colonization of this country and America and all these other countries that we have the Western Judeo-Christian values that we do have, and that we have people opening their arms to people of other nations and welcoming them and giving them work and giving them a place to stay, like they've done for my family. It is what it is. Mistakes have been made, of course, but that doesn't mean that overall it's all been bad. That doesn't mean that overall white people need to be demonized. Not too long ago on Facebook, I got into a very in-depth conversation with a somewhat prominent white Australian National Socialist individual, and he and I got into a public discussion where he stated that, well, I first of all stated that the Bible in fact doesn't care about race mixing. It's not an issue. In the Bible, God does not care about race mixing. And very quickly my portion of that conversation was deleted, which I found interesting. But then I reiterated my point and he came back with a screenshot. And in the screenshot, he must have written on Google or something, race mixing forbidden in the Bible, and then just screenshotted those first couple of verses. But in our private conversation, he had said that he has studied all these different religious texts. Well, that's very interesting, because if that were the case, he would know that he's only twisting the Bible verses to suit his specific translation of it. So I'm going to address that today and show you that God, in fact, from a biblical standpoint, does not care about race mixing. And as I said, I don't like the term race mixing because there is only one race, the human race. So God does not care about the different ethnic groups merging. So extreme right-wing nutjobs tend to turn to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 2 states that no one born of a forbidden marriage, nor any of their descendants, may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even in the 10th generation. At face value, that sounds extremely racist, like God is absolutely commanding that. But you need to take the Bible contextually, and sometimes that isn't done. So let's go to the verse before that. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 1. No one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly of the Lord. And then with the verse that comes after that, it makes a lot more sense. So verse 1, it is argued most likely is referring to idol worship. The deformities that are spoken of in verse 1 are self-mutilations, which are conducted for the purposes of idolatrous worship. It is presumed that this is for the goddess Ishtar, I-S-H-T-A-R. This then follows along to verse 2 where the forbidden marriage takes place. It's actually talking about marriage with a cult prostitute. So it's been completely taken out of context by this particular pagan. Deuteronomy chapter 7 verses 3 to 4. Do not intermarry with them, do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons. So we need to be specific again. Do not intermarry with who? Who are they talking about? Are they saying that we as Christians cannot marry others? Or are they saying we as humanity cannot marry humans of other ethnic groups? No, that's not what the Bible verse is saying. Now we need to go to Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 1 for the context. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, and he drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you. So verse 1 of this chapter has already indicated to us what verses 3 and 4 meant by saying do not intermarry. It's already listed the groups of people you are not meant to intermarry, and it takes place in a completely different time frame to now. It's a commandment for that particular time frame, for those particular people, for that particular ethnic group. Why? Why did God command this very specific commandment? Well, let's have a look. Okay, here it is. Because they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and he will swiftly destroy you. Okay, so it's not that hard to get. God makes a command very specific to the Israelites. To the Israelites, not to Christians, but to the Israelites of the time. If these extreme right-wing nutjobs really knew the scripture, they would know that the Israelites were commanded this by God because they had to preserve their covenant with God. Everyone knows that the Jews are considered God's chosen people. It's just known. They needed to keep their nation distinct from all other nations. Something not often illustrated, something not often mentioned is that others could join the Israelites. This has happened. When an Israelite goes off to join other ethnic groups, this angered God, but other groups could actually live cohesively and join in with the Israelites. A good example is Rahab. She's actually a descendant of Jesus Christ. Rahab actually assisted in the destruction of Jericho. She was a prostitute, but she joined the people of Israel. Ruth was a Moabite. So there is a difference between a commandment saying you may not go elsewhere, but others are allowed to join. There is a difference. It's quite a distinctive difference. The point of preserving Israel as a distinct nation was that its purpose was to be a holy people. It was a nation designed to be holy. Probably sounds ludicrous, but that was the role of the Jewish people. This is not much different to Christianity today, where Christians are advised to marry only people of the Lord. Race wasn't really a concept back then. It wasn't this sort of polarizing, divisive concept as it seems to be today, unnecessarily. So regarding the issue of race mixing, two different ethnic groups coming together, I offer you the following Bible verses to prove to you that God really doesn't care about this as a subject overall. So here's the first. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verses 39. A woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must be of the Lord. This is the only requirement. The only requirement is that he must be of the Lord. It doesn't say it doesn't say she can marry anyone she wants as long as they're not black. It doesn't say she can marry anyone she wants as long as they're not Chinese. It just says he must be of the Lord. I offer you the following verse from a very well-known story. Everyone knows the story of the Ten Commandments, how Moses parted the seas. So this story takes place in the book of Numbers. Numbers chapter 12 verses 1 to 12. So this will be a little bit long, but it's important because I didn't want to just offer you Bible verses from the New Testament. Everyone knows that with the introduction of the New Testament, the things that happen in the Old Testament are not quite as relevant because Jesus physically comes on earth and tells us the things he tells us. So the things of the Old Testament have to be taken really as contextually as possible. But listen to this story that is the perfect example of how God responds to actual racism. Okay? Are you ready? Miriam, who is Moses' sister, and Aaron, who is Moses' brother. Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife. Now Cushite we know today to be Ethiopian, so black, for he had married a Cushite. The anger of the Lord burned against them and he left them. When the cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous. She got leprosy. And he said to Moses, "Please, my Lord, I ask you not to hold it against us, the sin we have so foolishly committed. Do not let her be like a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb, with its flesh half eaten away." Why would God punish two individuals for talking against a Cushite woman? Why did God give Miriam leprosy for talking against a black woman? So race mixing is absolutely permitted in the Bible. It's not an issue at all. It really isn't. There are so many examples of biblical figures and race mixing. Ruth, who was a Moabite. Esther, who married a Persian king. Timothy, who had a Greek father and a Jewish mother. Boaz, who married a Moabite. Moses, who married a Midianite, also known as a Cushite. Today's terminology would be Ethiopian. Abraham, who had a child with an Egyptian woman known as Hagar. They had a baby known as Ishmael. To finish off my biblical-based rants, it is clear that the Bible, in fact, does not support the standpoint of these individuals who claim that race mixing is forbidden by God. Now, if they presented better arguments and they weren't biblical-based arguments and they had other pieces of evidence to support their claims, I wouldn't mind hearing it. It wouldn't offend me to hear it. They really don't have this particular foundation to stand on, and they should probably just stick to what they do best, which is the pagan stuff. Anyway, so that is the end of this particular video. I think I deserve to say this. Boom! We'll finish off with one final Bible verse that really does illustrate every single thing I've already claimed in this video. Galatians chapter 3 verses 28 to 29. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Jesus Christ. And if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. Thanks so much guys for watching. Please share, like and subscribe if you like the content in this video, and I'll catch you on the next video.